Okay, well, the introduction is, I actually try to, let me first begin with last year. Last year we looked at reconstruction of cities that were destroyed either by war or by natural disasters. And we looked at it really from a design point of view. So we looked at which concepts of reconstruction design are there around the world. So we looked at Japan, and we looked at we looked at Rotterdam, of course. We looked at Italy. We looked at many places, and we were especially looking for different concepts, different design concepts, different aesthetics, different ideas of how a city should look, and which role the architect could play in it. Should it be big, top-down master planning, or bottom-up, small-scale planning, etc. Now this year, and we had many guests from Ukraine again, and from the reconstruction of Syria, etc. But these were were all very much design questions. So which not just about the aesthetics of the design, but maybe more about which position does the architect take, does the planner take. This season, we're looking a little bit broader, and at the same time a little bit underneath the surface.
Even wachten, want je hebt hem verplaatst.
Oh. Yeah. Okay, thanks. And this time we're going to look at two questions that might seem unrelated or just very indirectly related. And the first is, who's really in power? So what is really going on in political, economic, political, economic, financial sense? What are the real kind of power drivers when it comes to the reconstruction of destroyed cities? And we even look at it from a global point of view. The other is, it seems like a banal question, but why in the official reconstructions does it all look the same? Why do all the images that are produced for the reconstruction of cities right now, why do they all look the same? Why do they all also use the same words? What's happening there? Why is it, whether you're in and not just reconstruction, but any large-scale master planning project, why is it that if you look at a master plan for an entirely new city in Indonesia, for example, why does it use the same kind of cliches and the same kind of images as, for example, the reconstruction of a part of New York that was damaged by Sandy? Why is that? Why is everything the same? So I'm trying to I'm going to try to connect these two questions, and but first I'll give a little bit of historical background. Now, the obvious historical background here is, of course, Rotterdam. This is the city of Rotterdam, exactly on the place of the around where the new institute is. So to your right would be the Boijmans van Beuningen Museum, and you're looking straight into the city towards the east, and you see the enormous firestorm that was caused by the bombing in May 1940. This is how the city. These are images that we see every day now, but then in color. This is how the city looked immediately afterwards, and this is what the national government, together with the local government and planners, decided to do. So this was not decided so much by the German occupiers, but this was really decided during the occupation by the Dutch officials. to completely wipe clean or to maximally wipe clean the surface of the city. So to not leave, so if a building was only partially damaged, they would wipe it away. Only extremely important symbolic buildings, like for example, the medieval Lawrence Church was kept up and reconstructed after the war, but for the rest, the entire slate was wiped clean, tabula rasa. And not just physically, but also administratively, all the ownership rights were abolished. And then people got a kind of piece of paper that they would get ownership back in an entirely new place after the war. So the entire administrative and physical structure of the city was wiped clean. Then during the war, there was a plan was being made, which is not this plan. A plan was being made that tried to reconstruct a city according to, you could say, age-old or logic of how a city should look. So it would be a city that would be more fitting for car traffic, yes, but in its architecture and its urban planning, it would be designed as a whole, and it would be given monumentality and places of orientation and meaning, etc. But in the last period of the war, a kind of coalition of industrialists, so Rotterdam, people from the private sector, as we would say now, factory owners, owners of very large shipping companies, because of course Rotterdam then was already a very large harbor, real estate barons, etc. So all the people, and they had a completely different idea of Rotterdam than the first plan. Their idea was that of an endlessly dynamic world harbor city. So the city should reflect the fact. The new city center, because it was only the center that was bombed, should reflect the fact that this was a business city. And this was a city about the future, and this was a city about shipping, and this was a city about the world, and this was a city about free trade, capitalism, and democracy. Those were the ideas that these planners had. And so the new plan for the city became a plan that was much more modernist and that was much more designed around an idea of ever dynamic businessmen. So that is the plan that looks very kind of square and also very low on details, because they said we are not going to design the details now because we don't know how the buildings of the future will look. Now this is very close to here. This is one of the first realizations of the rebuilt city. It's just if you walk through the station, this is the building that you will see. This is a wholesale building, and it is a concept that also the architects and the planners and the businessmen had picked up in America. So they had also traveled immediately after the war to America to look at these types of gigantic buildings where the wholesale companies of the entire city would be gathered together and all put in one building so that they would scale up their activities. And you can also see something else, that there was a sort of a highway system that was run through the city. So these are, of course, not normal things for a 20th century city, that you would have these underpasses, etc. So everything was about efficiency and business and the monumentality of business. So that is what you see here. So here you see all the businessmen, the architects and the mayor opening this underpass and also celebrating the existence of these new buildings. This also has caused the fact that because of that, we now have in our center of the city, we have sites and urban places that you would never associate with the center of a city. This is right in the center of Rotterdam, because this was this idea of the modernist city that could be built right in the center, because the slate was wiped clean and all ideas of how a center of a city should look were thrown out of the window. So that is why we have these really amazing quality flat buildings right in down the road, where you can imagine yourself somewhere in a Swedish suburb, but in fact you're in the center of Rotterdam. Now, what is also the result of this type of planning is what you see out of the window here. This kind of, these types of buildings, which are all from the 90s or 80s and 90s, that this is the center of the city. Normally in Amsterdam you would see this on the edge, you would see this on the Zuidas, as it is called. Here you see them right in the center of the city, and in fact many of the harbor barons, as they were called, their heirs, also have owned and have their businesses in these blocks here out of our window. This is the view from the cinema on top of the wholesale building, and you can actually see where we are sitting. You can see it in the third window from the left. That building standing on the corner there, that is our building. So you could see after the movie was shown, the curtains were drawn, and out of this new cinema building, people looked at the state of the reconstruction of Rotterdam really as a kind of accumulation of extremely modern, extremely new business buildings. Another view of the city. And of course, the center of Rotterdam was only a tiny, tiny part of the city of Rotterdam, the center, because what I just showed you is really only this. That's the center of Rotterdam. And all this was what the Rotterdam city is really about, which is, for a very long time, the biggest harbor in the world. And so the center of the city is nothing more than a kind of a service center for this enormous corridor, that's a word that I will use often today, of harbor that connected shipping of the whole world from the depth of the harbor was tuned to the depth of the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal, so that all the ships of the whole world could pass through here. This is also why this city was, it's interesting that in planners and urban geography circles, the idea of using, of planning according to corridors of shipping or corridors of rail or corridors of highways is called the Dutch school. So the whole idea of planning in terms of corridors is connected to the harbor of Rotterdam, in fact. Now, the connection of Rotterdam and the fact that Rotterdam profited also a lot from the Marshall Help, which was an American program to help Western countries to rebuild and reconstruct so that they would stay on the right side of the Cold War. This also hugely benefited the Netherlands, and also there was an enormous interest of not just other European countries but also of America after the war to keep open and to maximize the logistic power of Rotterdam Harbor and how it's connected to the other Western cities. By far the most money was invested in the reconstruction of Germany by America, and of course Rotterdam is more or less the front door for goods going to Germany. So this is why the reconstruction of Rotterdam, with as a symbolic heart its center, but as a real machine, the entire harbor, was a thing of global geo-economic importance. At the same time, just to give, the Americans also had to reconstruct on another continent, and this is the reconstruction of Japan. Now, the cities of Japan, not just Hiroshima, the worst hit city in Japan actually was Tokyo, which was nearly completely wiped away by firestorms caused by American bombings. Now, immediately after the war, America occupied, for 7 years, occupied Japan under General MacArthur, the tall guy on the left. General MacArthur came in, occupied Japan, and in 7 years had to completely turn around not just its economy, but also its political system. A parliamentary democracy was imposed. The emperor was not indicted for war crimes, but had to renounce his holiness, so his divinity. He had to renounce the fact that he was in fact a god, so that he became a constitutional monarch, just like our king. And maybe most importantly, all the know-how, pre-war and during and wartime know-how of American engineers, especially in mechanized and automated concrete building, was exported to Japan, and in a very short time Japanese companies learned from American consultants and American industrialists how to build anything on a very high level of precision and a very high speed. And the Nakamura Dam is one of its symbolic achievements. It was only built in 3 years. And of course, this is a reconstruction plan for Tokyo, was made also using modernist principles of highways and a kind of hierarchic system of parts of the city with their own centers, etc. Here you can see an exhibition of the, you can see exactly, that is so interesting. There was also an exhibition at this very same time in Rotterdam on the reconstruction of the Rotterdam Center. And you can see exactly the same type of graphic design, the same use of imagery, even the same, the blown up faces and etc. The kind of course this is in Japanese and here it was in Dutch, but if you don't look too closely to what is exactly shown, you could, they could be interchangeable. So this is, of course, what Europe and Asia looked like in the post-war period. With in blue, that's the West, and then there are the pink aligned countries and the red space. So this was actually, this was the Marshall Plan's investments in Europe. And you can see it is more or less NATO, EU. You can see already this is Marshall, the guy who organized all this. And here this is actually based on research that Michele did 15, nearly 20 years ago on the role of America and the role of the West in creating a worldwide network of aligned cities, regions, industries, philosophies of government, etc., that would then form a kind of competition with the other bloc, the Eastern Bloc of Russia, China, North Korea, etc. So especially in the reconstruction of Europe and Asia, and in the decolonizing times of Africa and in the 50s and 60s, you can see an enormous flow of money in all kinds of shapes and forms, government money and private money to the rest of the world. This, for example, is one program. It's called the Point 4 program, and it is especially for the emerging economies, as we now call them, the developing countries. And you can see an enormous investment here of American know-how, American power, and American money in developing these countries. Also, part of that idea was the export not just of purely of money, of means, or just not even just infrastructure, but also an idea of culture. And very much tied up to that idea of culture was modernism, modern architecture, modern planning, modern music, even modern art, as a symbol of freedom, as a symbol of democracy and freedom, vis-à-vis the social realist tradition of the communist bloc. So this is, and this very important part in that also played institutions, NGOs, you would say, like the Ford Foundation. Now, this is the Ford Foundation building in New York, and the Ford Foundation was basically an enormous bag of money collected by the Ford company, and then used to also, in parallel with American foreign policy, to drive up the Reconstruction and the modernization and the free market developments in the rest of the world. And of course, this was not just done out of ideological belief. This was, of course, also creating a worldwide client base. So there was an immediate logic, which was both ideological and business-wise, to these connections. So here you see Ford Foundation projects. You can see them in India and Pakistan. You can see them in Greece. You can see them in Chile, etc. This is McGeorge Bundy, and he was of the, hoe heet het ook weer? What was it called again? Well, he was an advisor to both John F. Kennedy and to Johnson, also on this worldwide foreign policy in action, as it is here called. So it was also about a foreign policy that needed to appear incredibly generous and that needed to appear incredibly broad and global. And he was one of the main architects of, so to speak, of these policies. And you can see him here below with Kennedy and above with Johnson. One of there were also architects who rode on this wave of globalization or global development. And one of the most interesting ones and one of the most important ones was actually a Greek architect from Athens called Konstantinos Doxiadis, who came up with a modus and a style of planning that was extremely consistent, extremely methodological, also modular, and it could create nearly out of nothing in a few days. It could create gigantic master plans for developing countries around the world, also fueled by American money, driven by American politics, etc. So he more or less came with the money. He came with the money, and he designed the new master plan for the new capital of the new country of Pakistan, Islamabad. So you can see that his plan is both incredibly top-down, you could say, blueprint, master planning. At the same time, it is done modularly. So this plan could grow, as you can see on the left. It could grow with the needs for growth, and this in a time of explosive urbanization in these areas. So this was a plan that on the one hand was extremely pragmatic, and on the other hand, you can see here, he was based in Athens, and then he built cities really all around the world. For Africa, Asia, South America, also very large master plans for cities like Detroit and also on the east coast of America, in Florida, etc. So this was a kind of planning that at the same, so this is the master plan, for example, for Baghdad. And this is what it looks from an armed helicopter in 2003. These enormous grids of housing are planned by Doxiadis. Now there's something interesting in these grids too. As you can see on the model on the left, you can see that every block of the grid has this small, looks like a shopping center. And these are neighborhood centers. So the idea of Doxiadis was a very modernist hierarchical idea of planning, that you first relate to your own family, then you relate to your neighbors, which could be like a street or a block, and then you relate to the neighborhood, and in the neighborhood you have the school and the shops, etc. That is where the center is, and then you relate to a part of town, and that's maybe where the secondary school is, etc. So in fact, this, what looks like an enormous, anonymous, endlessly repetitive sea of housing is in fact, or could be used from within, in fact, as something with place for intimacy. He also called these little corners in these places, he called them gossip corners, where people could just sit around and gossip. So there's this amazing scale difference between the actual scale of the plan and the intimacy of the designed corners and neighborhood centers. Now, Doxiadis was only one of many. So this is a whole row of mostly originally, no, all of them actually all of these architects are Europeans. So an enormous row of architects who have had to flee Nazi Europe and had come to often from Austria or from I think Louis Kahn even came from Ukraine, I believe, and Marcel Breuer from Germany, Sert from Spain, Le Corbusier from Switzerland, etc. And they all kind of had global reach in their planning, and they all thrived on, as you can see, what Michele has done here, is put together all these networks of money and political influence and the networks of the architects. And you can see this layered spider's web of influence and design. And all modernist architects who all card-carrying members of the international style, of modernism, of functionalism, of Siam, however you want to call it. Now, one of these people, the third from the left, is Walter Gropius. Walter Gropius had his offices in Harvard, and he called them the Architects Collaborative. And one of the late projects, which was finished after Gropius's death, was the industrial city of Jubail. It was an oil city in the new kingdom of Saudi Arabia. A gigantic city. Again, you can see the same kind of modernist hierarchical build-up, relatively flat, and then neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood. And this was built on the Persian Gulf. It was built in very short time. And now to go one step deeper, who built it? The architects just designed it, but who built it? Who was the construction company? And the construction company was Bechtel, and you can see that on the left. Now Bechtel, so they paid the architect, etc. They consumed the most part of the enormous budget released by Aramco, so the Saudi oil companies, and they built this city. Now Bechtel was a very interesting company. They still exist. They are bigger than ever, and they always existed on the basis of a very, very close relationship with American government federal policy, and after the war, foreign policy, the defense industry, etc. So this is just a really random sample of the things that they have done in the past 80 years. So there's the Hoover Dam. That is in the FDR times. That's what put them on the map. Then they also did the public transportation system in San Francisco, built that. They built Jubail. They built the Channel Tunnel, connecting England to France. They also, after the Gulf War, they got an enormous, for billions, a contract to stop the fires in the Kuwait oil reserves that were caused by the Iraqi army. They also did the Big Dig in Boston, one of the biggest infrastructure projects ever, the high-speed railway. And then on this map are not things like they covered up Chernobyl. When Chernobyl nearly melted down, they did the cover-up. They also built themselves dozens and dozens of nuclear reactors, etc., etc., etc. It is really, they got a call from the American government, from Dick Cheney, a couple of weeks before America decided to invade Iraq. They got a call, if we invade Iraq, you will get the contract to rebuild it. So they got that call before so this is nearly like Reconstruction before the actual destruction begins. So this is also something that paid them billions. Here you can see this was also revealed in an amazing book that you should all read by Sally Denton on Bechtel, The Profiteers. And you can see here also one of the things that these companies thrive on is that there's like a rotating door of people of government who are on the board of directors in Bechtel and then go back to be in government, back to Bechtel, back in government, etc. So there's an immediate contract between the technical engineers and consultants and builders of Bechtel and many other companies like this, but they are the biggest, and the very highest levels of foreign policy. Bechtel is a private company. They're owned by the family Bechtel still, so they don't have to look more friendly than they actually are. So this is on their website. Tomorrow is ours to build. That is their slogan. And one of the biggest things, you can also see these two guys, it's defense and security. That is one of the things that they earn the most money with. They build American army camps, everything. So they build the army up, and then whatever the army destroys, they also get to reconstruct, being paid for by the country that has just been destroyed. So it's a perfect business model. Now, a little bit back to the policy side. Of course, we don't have the Cold War as we knew it is different now, but still not so much different. One of the things that America especially, but also parts of Europe, find the most threatening is China's Belt and Road. And the Belt and Road policy of China is, you know of it of course, is in fact a global policy, very much a mirror image of what American policy over the world has been, to invest enormously in nodes and lines and zones of infrastructure around the world, of logistics, etc., so that Chinese trade can become dominant. So there was a study group that made a very deep, one of many of course, but this is a study that was done by the Council for Foreign Relations. Again, a very old and also a company or a think tank that also played a role in Michelle's research. And this think tank made a study on what are the implications of the Chinese Belt and Road system policy, and should America and the West react? Now, as you can see, one of the people on the commission is Brendan Bechtel, the third from above. And Brendan Bechtel is actually the seventh prince in the Bechtel, or seventh emperor in the Bechtel dynasty. He's a man in his early 50s, and there's always been Bechtels in charge of Bechtel, and he was part of this commission advising the American government. So this is what they saw. So on the one hand, the Belt and Road started out as a quite simple infrastructural system of harbors and train lines and highways and special economic zones, etc., that would connect all these places going from China through Sri Lanka and Malaysia, Indonesia, Italy, etc. So this is how it started out. But since then, Belt and Road has kind of exploded around the world, and Belt and Road is now just a word that describes attempts, and sometimes very successful attempts by China to invest deeply in foreign trade partners, and as you can see, for an enormous part in the developing countries. So some of the same countries that America had tried to bring to their side with the Point 4 program, now they are being brought to the Chinese side by the Belt and Road Initiative. This is, for example, what it can do with a country. So, for example, there's Kenya, and you have a very large water supply, a port, a rail, road, but also things like safe city surveillance. So, Belt and Road, not just, they also pay for services to that the local government thinks important or wants, or makes the city safer, or makes their power greater. Belt and Road can also pay for that. And here's the same thing, a very dense network of corridors, etc., going through Pakistan, connecting China through Pakistan to the Arabian Sea. Also, Belt and Road has also a very big impact in Europe. For example, the Chinese, after the European Union nearly forced Greece to sell off all its public-owned infrastructure, Belt and Road, or China, stepped in and bought the entire port of Piraeus. And the port of Piraeus, one of the oldest international ports in the world, it already existed 3,000 or 2,500 years ago, is now completely owned by Chinese state companies. But they also have bought enormous stakes in Rotterdam. The Euromax terminal here in Rotterdam is owned by these companies. The Zeebrugge, the harbor in Flanders, is owned for 70% by Chinese companies. So we here are in the forefront of this tension, this international tension. So what did America do? America and the West, they tried to set up another belt, our own kind of Belt and Road. And one of these, so to connect the Western countries to each other as a kind of competition with Belt and Road. And one of them is the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. And there you can see it being set up with Ursula von der Leyen, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Modi from India, and there you see Joe Biden. So it is being set up as a kind of so it's another Belt and Road, but it's not called that way. It's called the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. Here you can see what the idea is. So India is very much not aligned with China. So you have Pakistan, where the Chinese Belt and Road goes through. So what we in the West, we want a kind of non-India, non-China aligned connection going on. So it goes from India by boat to the Emirates, through Saudi Arabia, through Jordan, to Israel, to Greece, to the rest of Europe. One of the other ideas is the so-called blue dot network. So these are countries that more or less, very modern countries like Japan, Australia, America, England, that more or less guarantee or certificate the quality of the infrastructure nodes that are aligned to the West. So to say, these are countries that with such a high level of modernity that they kind of guarantee the sustainability, the etc., the trustworthiness, the quality of the infrastructure that is being invested. So this is the blue dot certification network. And again, here you can see there's Anthony Blinken, the minister, the state secretary. He has a talk about these, the blue dot network. And then also there is Mr. Bechtel again turning up in these international talks and saying that this is a spotlight on this hugely important issue. Infrastructure is a driver of sustainable and inclusive, also all these words, remember, of economic the economic development. Of course, Bechtel is enthusiastically supportive of Blue Dot, etc. And here you see Mr. Bechtel, red-headed young Mr. Bechtel, talking to His Royal Highness, the Deputy King of Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia will be one of the biggest investors in infrastructure in this network. There will be an entirely new railway network and highway network crisscrossing Saudi Arabia, connecting the Emirates with Jordan and in the end with Israel. Here you can see it going through. Now, a bit of a shock, but these are the plans that were made by, that were published by Benjamin Netanyahu's office for the reconstruction of Gaza. He also switched on AI and created these images. Now, Netanyahu unveils, so this is the regional plan for Gaza. And what he also says is with rail service to Neom. Now, I don't have a picture of Neom because you all know it. It's this, the line, the 150 kilometers long mega utopian, dystopian project in the north of Saudi Arabia. So Netanyahu says, I'm going to make a special economic zone out of Gaza, and it will be connected to Saudi Arabia, and it will be a hub for a new electric vehicle manufacturing. And here you can see, so this is also from the plan of the Prime Minister. So you can see the railway there going from Beersheba, which is a city south of Gaza. And you can see it connecting through this network of railways to different ports on the Red Sea and to the corridor that goes through the United Emirates. And it will be the Gaza, Arish, Sderot free trade zone. Arish is on the left. That's a huge harbor built by the Egyptians. And in between that, Gaza will be a special economic zone. Don't think that these are just plans, because as we speak, corridors have been bombed through already, going from the Israeli road that separates from the border of Gaza straight through built-up area in Gaza, and there's one that goes over the Egyptian-Gazan border, and one that is bombed straight through, and that is the Netzarim corridor there. So already, and this is what in Israeli planning tradition and wartime tradition is called creating facts on the ground. So even they don't wait until a plan has passed through all the political and juridical or legal phases. They just start building the road, and thereby making it into a fact, just like that. So there you can see the road. So these images are before and after the war. You can see that most of the buildings are gone, and that the road is is going from the harbor straight to the harbor highway, or from the border straight to the harbor highway. Now, this is not just because of 7th of October last year, and etc. Gaza has been under siege for decades, and Gaza has been more or less the same problem as it is, but now it's just more intense than it was. So this is the peace plan created by the Trump government, Trump administration, by his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who comes from a very important New York real estate family. And so this is the plan that they made together with Netanyahu. Netanyahu was all for it. And the idea here is to shrink even further the Palestinian areas in the West Bank, and then to clean up Gaza, clean it up, as he said. Jared Kushner has praised the very valuable potential of Gaza as waterfront property and suggested Israel should remove civilians while it cleans up the strip. Where should they be removed to? To these two spots in green on the Egyptian border in the middle of the desert. So that's the Negev desert. So the people of Gaza would be moved to the Negev desert. Then they would rebuild Gaza as a special economic zone. And then some of them maybe could turn back. So this is an idea not based on the two-state solution, because here it is still just colonization. But this is the idea for Gaza, which might, but this was made in 2020, 4 years ago. But now, of course, Trump is back, etc. Netanyahu is still there. So this is a realistic kind of realistic kind of direction that it might take. Now, since the current war in Gaza, also people from, you could say, from the more moderate conservative sides in America have thought about what to do with Gaza. And this is also an amazing thing, actually, if you think about it. All those ideas being made in America, like thousands of miles away, in America, you have all these NGOs, columnists in the New York Times, architects, etc. Everybody just thinks, what shall we do with Gaza? Never anything from the region itself. Always, what shall we do? Where shall we put them? Maybe we could put some of them here, some of them there. Maybe we should demolish this and build that, etc. So in that sense, nothing has changed since the 1950s. And here Bret Stephens, so he's a kind of a moderate Republican, and he says, the long-term ambition would be to turn Gaza into a Mediterranean version of Dubai, offering a proof of concept that in 10 or 15 years would allow a Palestinian state to emerge. So first Dubai, and then maybe they could achieve statehood, on the model of the United Arab Emirates, future-oriented, allergic to extremism, open to the world. This, however, is another guy, another columnist, and this is even more flimsy because it's on Twitter. However, this guy is you could say an oligarch, Bill Ackman, and a very strong billionaire and a very strong supporter of Trump, etc. So what he says is make new Gaza, a model city. Think of NEOM, so like the line, but on the Mediterranean, and make it governed by a consortium of Gulf states and the US. So again, it's from outside inward. And then he says, these are the steps. Civilians in Gaza are moved to a refugee camp, safe zone built in the Negev desert. So that's what Jared Kushner also wanted. You simply destroy Hamas, then you reconstruct Gaza, and then the civilians return. As always, I welcome your feedback, he ends his tweet with. Now, this then is Chris Choa. Chris Choa is part of NEOM. No, not NEOM, ACOM. ACOM is what I will speak about next. Chris Choa is a kind of guru. Chris Choa is an architect. He also advises Rotterdam, and he writes books, and he flies around the world, and he talks about sustainability and inclusivity and walkability and reuse, circularity, participation, etc. And then he is also part of a group, he calls it a group, as if it's a club of amateurs coming together, known as Palestine Emerging. And Palestine Emerging is in fact a kind of a project around which some of the largest building companies in the Middle East, the largest design consultancy firm in the world, namely the one that Chris Choa is part of, they are around it, and they are now producing plans that seemingly are the opposite of these extremely aggressive, you could say misanthropic plans of Trump and Netanyahu, etc. But in fact that are not maybe that different. Only they are much more attuned to a kind of political correct language. So here, two of them are here, and one of them, the top one, is Kobi Rutenberg, who's actually a colleague of Alexander de Hooghe, who will speak to us next time. And the other one is Roy Black, I believe, and they are working on a plan for Palestine emerging, and it is very much presented to you as something that comes from within, something that is about the Palestinians being emancipated and they're coming from Palestine, etc. And the idea is to make a huge kind of band city, a kind of a linear city of all the cities in the West Bank and then connect it to Gaza. Here you can see it. It's called the Ark. And it was already paid for, drawn by AECOM, which I will talk about later, paid for by the RAND Corporation. The RAND Corporation is one of those enormous American think tanks that came up in the post-war period. And they, in 2005, already paid for this plan to connect Gaza in a big arc to Hebron, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, Nablus, etc. Now this plan has more or less reappeared, now that things are getting hot again in Palestine. And so this is AECOM. This is their report. Now AECOM is differently than Bechtel. AECOM is a company that is publicly traded. So they have to make sure that they look fantastic and look friendly and look sustainable on the outside, just like Shell or whichever kind of oil company that is publicly traded. They need to have an outside that looks incredibly clean and incredibly humanist. Otherwise, it would be unattractive for people to buy stock. They have 95,000 people working for them over the world, and they're more or less they're engineering consultants. They have an architect and planning office of a few thousand people. They do project management and all those kinds of things. Here is some of the things that they've done. So they have Ukraine reconstruction. We'll come to that later. They're doing the Shemur facility. They build gigantic factories. They are organizing the COP summit that is going on right now. They do offshore wind. They work for the US Army Corps of Engineers. And then, of course, they show a friendly plan by the US Army Corps of Engineers, water and stuff. But they also build gigantic army camps together with Bechtel in Afghanistan, for example. And they build prisons. They build enormous prisons, privately owned prisons all through the United States. But this is how they present. So they have looking at their reports is like looking at when we at the school have to file, have to ask for money from the cultural money to fund the school. It nearly looks like the endless asking for a kind of performative inclusivity, sustainability. How diverse is your staff? how gender affirmative are, etc., etc., etc. They all do that. This is all that same company that builds really the most scary kinds of prison buildings in America also they even have their own coding system for all the different minorities that they have a connection with. So they have the Pride, the Pride LGBT community, they have the Veterans Alliance, they have the Gender Alliance, they have the Ethnic Diversity Network. It's an amazing kind of how do you call this? An amazing net or hallucination, or you could say camouflage with political correct systems and certifications and norms and numbers, etc. But the real reason that they are, of course, always on one of the biggest things that they can advertise themselves to this enormous market of partially self-inflicted disaster that they can then come in and reconstruct is the fact that they were the engineers, the consultants, and the project managers for in America at least, the biggest post-war reconstruction project ever, which is Ground Zero. So they built this and they asked some architect to sketch it out. So this is one of their biggest markets, disaster planning, and that you can see their world plan for disaster planning and recovery. This is one of their slogans. We simplify complexity to deliver urban transformation. This is how they show that their process goes. So a lot of talking like us here, a lot of talking, a lot of communication, very deliberative, very open, very diverse, very and with gathering key facts and workshops and etc. This is this is all the phases that they go through, and so the stakeholder engagement and the environment and the vision and the opportunities and the analysis and the stakeholder feedback, and so this is the process that they sell, more or less. And so here you have, this is the process so they also made this master plan for Gaza. And here you have it. You have this enormous, and in fact, this master plan could be anywhere, could be for anything or anywhere. As you can see, Gaza border, big corridor running straight through it, and it's all a workshop with youths. So I'm sure that must have had an enormous influence on their decisions. One of they introduced two game changers, as they call it, to the Gaza reconstruction. One is actually a kind of a huge corridor that connects Gaza to the West Bank. And this corridor, whereas Netanyahu and Trump just said, just build a tunnel, and they make this very complicated corridor zone where the traffic that goes from left to right can completely avoid the traffic that goes from north to south, and they can kind of pass each other. The other game changer is a gigantic new harbor and airport off the coast. So you can imagine how this ties in to this India-Mediterranean corridor that I talked about before, because this would then, by these new railways, would connect straight through Jordan to Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and India. And of course, because of the Western aligned countries, Israel is really the only part of the Eastern Mediterranean that is connected to the sea. So that is why Gaza is so incredibly important to this kind of global infrastructure politics. And here's what the city would look like. This is what Gaza would look like. You know, it's wonderful. And also, again, it could be anywhere. Well, there's a mosque, but then we have mosques here too. So this is the plan by AECOM to sell Gaza. Now, Ukraine. It's a bit shorter, this, so don't worry. This is again the Rand Company, as you can see. The same Rand Company as that promoted this thinking about Gaza, the same Rand Company that in parallel with United States foreign policy and in parallel to this network of international architects influenced state building, nation building, infrastructure building, economic ties, logistics, etc., all over the world. And also, especially the Rand Company also very much talks about how to install democratic governance systems, transparent bureaucracies, etc. So the Rand Company, Rand also looks at the reconstruction of Ukraine. Pinsent Masons, which is one of the largest law firms in the world, also connected to these networks, says, call it Europe's new Marshall Plan. So what America did for us, we will now do for Ukraine. But again, we have here the problem of these international networks of logistics. And here, for example, this is more or less the status quo of a few years back, where you have Russia's pipelines and going from Russia into Eastern Europe and into Central Europe and into Western Europe. And so more or less the zone of geopolitical rivalry is exactly the hatched zone of Belarus, Ukraine, etc. So that is where the tension is. And of course, by now, Belarus has turned dark blue. Ukraine is now a war zone. So what do we do? What do we do is we have a thing called the 3 Seas network. And this is a kind of, this is related to the network like the it's literally related to the network of routes that connects the Mediterranean to China, but this takes it a few seas further. So it connects the Mediterranean Sea, the Black Sea, and the Baltic. It connects and the idea is to completely stuff these countries full of infrastructure and logistics and special economic zones, etc., so that trade could go in a few days from the Black Sea and the Mediterranean to the north. And this would be, so it also crosses straight through this network that, so it's an enormous turnaround of history, in fact, because the countries involved were all, except Austria, were all countries that have been for ages completely reliant on east-west corridors going from Central Europe to Russia. So now the West, as we call it, and America again, very important project for America, has said, and this is already like 8 years old, this initiative, to turn it on its head and create north-south connections for these countries. So it's a nearly also symbolic kind of turning away from the connection to Russia. Now, since the Ukraine was invaded, the Americans have said, we are paying so many billions into the fund used by the 3 Seas network, which is the black, because they were all members of the EU, but only if you also involve Ukraine. So now the 3 Seas network of investments is also the main source, or one of the main sources, for investment in Ukrainian infrastructure. So they have to take Ukraine on board, and there will be entire railway systems going from Lviv and Odessa into Poland, etc. So this is to pull. So this has nothing to do with the EU or anything. This is really hardware to pull them closer to the West. Here you can see the 3 Seas network, all kinds of, and with on the left Zelensky. So this is the last one in April. Now, again, what is happening in so again, you can see enormous investments in power relations and money also going to Ukraine from America, and also America kind of taking the lead in distributing and managing the money that is pumped in from Europe, which is even more than from America. So BlackRock and JP Morgan, one of the 2 biggest investment banks in the world, are helping Ukraine to set up this reconstruction bank. And Bechtel, again, and Ukraine are signing a reconstruction agreement. So the idea is actually very consistent. America pumps enormous amounts of money in a foreign relation, and then plows back the money because it makes sure that its own companies go there to spend the money for that country. So the money and then again some of our European money. So the money that goes in is immediately turned back through the pathway of Bechtel and AECOM and many other companies, and BlackRock and JP Morgan, etc. Which also explains this very close relationship between the companies and the state. Here you can see AECOM doing all kinds of things, signing all kinds of contracts throughout. Always this guy signing contracts for a new airport and a new railway, a new harbor, a new this and a new that. But then if you look at then something funny happens, because if you look then at the designs that are being made for the cities, and a lot of these cities that are being reconstructed and redesigned are of course also that is also paid for and related to these enormous investments in infrastructure. But this is, for example, for the city of Kharkiv, which is kind of in the east. And there, the Norman Foster Foundation, which is his own charity, but it's not really a charity, it's very connected to the Norman Foster Office. Norman Foster Office is one of the largest and most powerful architecture offices in the world, obviously, and Norman Foster is the star. He's like the master builder, the guru, etc. So Norman Foster offers to go and design the master plan with his for Kharkiv. So he, and again, this thing with sitting around and talking and workshopping and drawing and talking, etc., and then making this master plan that is very sensitive, etc., and then making little sketches in which Norman Foster cannot stop himself from introducing in this little sketch his Gherkin office building that he designed for London. So it's this again and then the idea of the master plan was to make a general master plan, and then the Norman Foster Foundation. Oh, this is, by the way, done together with Arup, and Arup is a kind of Bechtel, but smaller, and kind of AECOM Bechtel, but smaller, and from England, from Britain. And then the idea would be to have an international competition for the different zones of reconstruction in Kharkiv. And this would be overseen and judged by a jury of Norman Foster and Farshid Mousavi, also this global architect, and they chose this. so this is one of done by a young English architect for one of the reconstruction part. And again, everything you see here could be anywhere, could be literally anywhere. Could be in Gaza, could be in Vlaardingen, could be anywhere, anything, anywhere. And it's also interesting if you invite on board young architects. What are the Ukrainians? You know, what are they? Where are they? It's very interesting. This is for the city of Mykolaiv, another city in the east of Ukraine. And here you have an office that I had not heard of before, and it's called One Works. And it's run by an Italian, the guy on the right. And he presents here his master plan to the mayor of Mykolaiv. And then you think, oh, so, and again, this is also paid for by the UN. Initially it's paid for by and you think, oh, well, at least they took an office, an Italian office, you know, that can't be that bad. And so they made a master plan. But then if you look at the other things that One Works has done, you see that they call themselves an office that also does project management, real estate investments, etc. They have offices from London straight through to Dubai. They built the regional airport of Azerbaijan, the Riyadh metro. They even built an enormous special economic zone in Dakar. And then they come up with this plan for Kharkiv. Again, completely generic and somehow, yeah, again, this could have been done by the young British architect or by AECOM. It could be anywhere. So for me, this is the real, this is the question. I mean, apart from all the nasty power relations going on, what it produces is a kind of blank stare, dead eyes, walkability, sustainability, green, urbanism that is also taught at every architecture school in the world. So with that, on that depressing note, that's it for now.